The rain tapped gently against the windshield as David Mercer pulled his car to a stop in front of the crumbling, six-story building. Hawthorne Place. The brass plate above the entryway read, though most of the letters had rusted into obscurity. He sat in silence, engine idling, watching the soft glow flicker from the fifth window on the right. Apartment 5C. The lights were on. Again. It was the third night in a row. David checked his watch. 2:38 a.m. No one had lived in apartment 5C for over 30 years. The unit had been condemned after a fire in the 90s. Nothing catastrophic, but enough to leave the place uninhabitable. The building's landlord, a reclusive man named Mr. Heron, never renovated it. Said it wasn't worth it. Said the space was better left empty. And yet, the lights. He leaned back in his seat, trying to shake the chill that crawled up his spine every time he thought about it. He'd moved into Hawthorne Place a month ago, a short-term lease, while covering a local political corruption story for a news outlet that barely paid enough to afford his caffeine habit. The building had been quiet.
Dingy. Cheap.
The kind of place that smelled like mildew and resignation. But then, on his third night, he'd seen it. From the parking lot. A soft, pale glow seeping through the curtains of 5C. At first, he thought it was a mistake. Maybe a new tenant moved in and no one mentioned it. Maybe Heron had done some late-night reno and flipped it without telling anyone. But then he asked, "Oh no," the neighbor from 4B had said, eyes wide. "No one lives there. That place is shut tight. Been that way since before I moved in. You couldn't pay me to step inside." Still, the lights came on. David had snapped a few photos. He'd gone through the building records. Even tried knocking. No answer. And so now, a week later, he was back, with a flashlight, a camera, and a notebook. Something about it gnawed at him. Not just as a tenant, but as a journalist. Something was off. And, tonight, he was going to find out what. He stepped out into the rain, pulling his coat tight, and made his way up the cracked stone steps. The buzzer had long since given up the ghost, and he had to shoulder the heavy door open. The building interior smelled worse than usual. Stale water.
Rischt. Mold.
But something else too, something faint and sour, like rotting fruit. The elevator was a relic, an old cage-style lift that rattled more than it rose. He didn't trust it. He never had. So he took the stairs. They creaked under his weight as he climbed, each floor darker than the last. By the time he reached the fifth, the air felt thicker.
Stale.
Like something had been sealed up for years. A single flickering bulb buzzed overhead, casting long, twitching shadows down the hallway. He turned the corner, breath catching. There it was. Apartment 5C. The door was exactly as he remembered, peeling blue paint, rusted knob, a crooked 5 hanging from a single screw. But the light under the door was unmistakable. Someone or something was inside. David took a deep breath, steadied his hand, and raised the camera. 1 click.
2.
He stepped closer, pressing his ear to the wood. Nothing. Then a soft thud. He jerked back. Another thud, like a footstep. Then silence. He glanced up and down the hall. Not a soul. Only the humming light above and the quiet drip of something leaking down the far stairwell. He should have turned back. He would think that for the rest of his life. But instead, he tried the knob. It was locked. Of course it was. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a thin toolkit. Not standard issue for a journalist, but he'd picked up the basics over the years. Lockpicking 101. He worked fast, heart pounding.
Click.
The door creaked open.
Darkness.
Total, suffocating darkness. Except a light. Faint from the far end of the apartment. Somewhere beyond a narrow hallway, just past a broken mirror. He stepped inside. And then a sound. Behind him, a whisper. He turned sharply, raising the light. But again, the room was empty. He was beginning to feel the edges of panic press against his ribs. He told himself it was just a prank. Or a faulty wire. Maybe Heron was hiding something. Maybe he just wanted the unit off the books. Maybe this was all explainable. But then he saw the photos. Taped to the wall, near what used to be the kitchen.
Dozens of them.
Old, curling black and white prints. Of people. Residents? Children? No, not quite. Each one showed someone inside apartment 5C.
Sitting. Standing. Sleeping.
But the backgrounds were all the same, this room. This very room. In different decades. And in every photo, a shadow. Lurking in the corner. Same shape. Same height. Unchanging. Watching. David stumbled back, nearly tripping over a toppled chair. His flashlight flickered, then steadied. Something scraped in the hallway.
He turned.
The door had creaked open wider. Then footsteps.
Slow.
Measured. Someone was in the apartment. He backed away, trying not to breathe too loudly, heart thundering in his ears. He ducked behind the broken couch, trying to steady his camera. Another footstep. Then, silence. He waited. Minutes passed. Nothing. He exhaled. Then something moved across the mirror in the hallway. A figure.
Tall. Pale.
Walking past, but not casting a shadow. He blinked.
Gone.
His camera clicked instinctively. He stood, carefully, and made his way back toward the mirror. Nothing there. The hallway was empty again. But the mirror, it was no longer cracked. Instead, it reflected something different. Not the hallway, but another room entirely. One with no door.
No windows.
And in the center of it, himself. David. Standing still. Motionless. Staring. His reflection tilted its head slowly. Blood smeared the floor. Faint, but visible. The apartment was no longer silent. A low, droning hum had begun to rise, like a distant siren underwater. David bolted. Out the hallway. Down the stairs. Out the front door. He didn't stop running until he reached his car. He fumbled with the keys, started the engine, and peeled away from Hawthorne Place without looking back. The building faded into the fog behind him. He didn't go home that night. He drove until sunrise, parked at a diner 3 towns over, and tried to forget the reflection smile. But when he checked the photos on his camera later, one stood out. It was of him, in the apartment,
Sleeping.
alone, but taken from across the room. And he had never taken that picture. David didn't sleep for 2 days. The image haunted him. Not just the eerie familiarity of seeing himself asleep on that ratty, scorched couch inside 5C, but the angle of the photo. It was taken from high up, like someone or something had been standing directly above him, watching, waiting. And yet, he had no memory of falling asleep. He was certain he'd fled that place the moment the mirror shattered.
Certain.
But the timestamp on the photo said otherwise. 2:49 a.m., exactly 11 minutes after he'd entered the apartment. He stared at the metadata over and over. It hadn't been altered. He hadn't edited it. He couldn't have. So who took it? And why was he asleep? He tried to go back to normal, pretending the whole thing had been some bizarre episode, a stress-induced hallucination. Maybe. He threw himself back into work, ignored Heron's cold stares in the hallway, and stopped glancing up at the 5th-floor window. But then 3 days later, it happened again. The light. Only this time, it wasn't just the lamp. From the parking lot, David could see movement. Faint shadows shifting behind the curtain. Not like a flicker of fabric or wind. Actual motion. Like someone was walking around inside. He froze, coffee in hand, heart pounding against his ribs. This wasn't curiosity anymore. This was dread. Still, he couldn't look away. And as he watched, the curtain slowly, carefully, drew open. There was no one behind it. Just the lamp. And the mirror. But on the surface of the mirror, clear as day, was a hand. Pressed against the inside of the glass. He blinked. Stepped back.
Gone.
The curtain fell shut on its own. That night, David didn't return to the apartment. He booked a cheap motel on the edge of town and sat awake, pacing, scribbling notes. Something was wrong in Hawthorne Place. Something that made no logical sense. And the deeper he went into it, the more questions piled up. He needed answers. So the next day, he drove to City Records. The clerk behind the glass, a thin, graying man who smelled like mothballs and cold cigarettes, raised an eyebrow when David mentioned the address. Hawthorne Place? That's still standing. Barely. What do you want to know? Anything on apartment 5C. Tenants. Incidents. Maintenance records. The clerk sighed and disappeared into the back. 20 minutes later, he returned with a stack of faded files, bound in twine. No digital records that far back. These go up to 1996. After that, nothing. David opened the top folder, and his stomach dropped. The names were all redacted, sloppily, as if someone had gone over them quickly with a marker. But the dates, they were clear. 4 separate tenants. All moved into 5C. Each stayed less than 6 months. Each left under unusual circumstances. One had vanished entirely. The police file said the tenant, a woman in her late 20s, had simply stopped going to work. Friends filed a report. When officers broke into the apartment, it was empty. No signs of struggle. No signs of packing. Just her purse on the counter and an old photograph on the wall. The same photograph David had seen. A child sitting on the couch, staring off camera. Same couch. Same shadows. David's hands trembled as he flipped to the next folder. The last entry was dated 1995. A man named Terrence Alden, a schoolteacher, moved in mid-March, gone by late July.
Dead.
The report didn't list a cause of death. Just a single line. Found in stairwell. Apparent fall. Facial expression noted as unusual. Eyelids removed post-mortem. David recoiled. No investigation. No follow-up. It was as if the city had decided to bury the whole building under red tape and moldy silence. He copied what he could, snapped photos of the documents, and left. There was only one person left who might know more. Mr. Heron. He hadn't seen the man in over a week. No one really had. The landlord kept to himself, rarely emerging from his ground-floor office. But when David knocked that afternoon, the door opened almost instantly. Heron stood there, hunched and gray-eyed, like he hadn't slept in a month. "You've seen it, haven't you?" he asked. David hesitated. "Seen what?" "Don't play dumb. You've been asking around. You've been in 5C. David stared. "What is it?" Heron didn't answer. Instead, he stepped aside and gestured for David to enter. The office was dim, cluttered, reeking of mold and dust. Filing cabinets lined the walls, and a small black and white TV hummed quietly in the corner. "I bought this building in '82, Heron said, collapsing into an armchair. "Didn't know the history. Just needed the income. Rent was cheap. Place had been abandoned for years." He lit a cigarette with shaking hands. But apartment 5C, no one stayed long. First girl, barely 19, hung herself in the bathroom. Second guy, a mechanic, claimed he kept waking up with scratches all over him. Third went missing entirely. Cops never found a trace. David sat, eyes locked on the man. "Why didn't you close it down?" "I tried. Boarded it up. But something always happens."
Boards come luz.
Doors open. The light turns on. People get curious. And curious people, Heron exhaled smoke. They don't stay sane long. David leaned forward. "What's inside that apartment?" The landlord met his gaze, and for the first time, David saw genuine fear. "There's something wrong with the mirror." David blinked. "The mirror? Came with the place. Built into the wall. Can't move it. Can't break it. Believe me, I've tried. Tenants say they see things in it. People watching them. Shadows. And then it starts reflecting things that haven't happened yet." He paused, coughing violently into a stained handkerchief. "Once the mirror shows you, it remembers. You become part of it. Like a loop." David's skin prickled. "I saw myself in it. But not me. My reflection moved when I didn't." It smiled. Heron's face turned pale. "Then it's already started." "What is it?" "I don't know. Maybe it's cursed. Maybe it's the door. But whatever it is, it feeds off attention."
Fear. Curiosity.
"That's why I stopped renting it. I thought if no one went in, it'd fade." David stood. "You should burn the place down." Heron looked up at him. "You think I haven't tried?" The silence between them grew thick, heavy with implication. Then something strange happened. The TV in the corner, long ignored, flickered. Static. Then a picture. Grainy. Black and white. Apartment 5C. Live footage. The lamp. The mirror. And, in the center of the room, a figure. Standing still. Watching. But not alone. A second figure appeared behind it. David took a step closer. The second figure was him. He turned to Heron. "Is that Liv?" The old man didn't respond. The TV buzzed. Lines warped across the screen. The camera zoomed slightly on its own, centering on the mirror. The reflection showed only one figure now. And it was still smiling. David backed away slowly. "I need to go." "Don't go back there," Heron warned. "Whatever you do, stay out of that room." But David already knew he couldn't. Whatever it was, the mirror, the apartment, the thing inside it, it wasn't finished with him. And it wouldn't be until he looked again, until it pulled him back in. He left without another word. That night, the light in apartment 5C came on again. And this time it never turned off. David didn't remember falling asleep. But when he opened his eyes, he was sitting in his own apartment, not 5C, clutching his phone, the TV humming faintly in the background. Morning light filtered in through the blinds, hazy and gray, giving everything an unnatural stillness. He sat up with a jolt. Had he gone back last night? His memory was fragmented, like a dream half-remembered. There was a hallway, too long to be real. A flickering light above. And a sound, a constant low hum. Not electrical, more like breathing. Then that mirror. Always that mirror. He checked his phone. No new photos. No missed calls. But a new video was saved in his gallery. He didn't remember filming it. With trembling hands, he tapped play. The footage began with darkness. A slow shuffle of footsteps echoed in a narrow corridor. Then, faintly, light began to glow. "A familiar, ya lo viste." Apartment 5C. The door creaked open. The camera, presumably held at chest level, moved inside, slowly, like someone trying not to wake a sleeping child. The familiar layout appeared.
Couch.
Mirror. Lamp. But the room was full of static, not from the video but from the air. That's the only way David could describe it. Like something vibrating at a frequency just outside human hearing. Then came the whisper.
Low.
Inhuman. Not words. Just a rhythm. A pattern. The camera turned toward the mirror, and there it was. David's reflection. Staring back. But smiling. Only the reflection smiled. And behind it, just barely visible, was something else. Not a person. Not a shadow. A figure, tall, indistinct, warped like it was standing beneath rippling water. Watching him. The video cut off. David dropped the phone. He wanted to scream. To run. To do anything but sit in that silence, in that awful stillness. But part of him knew. He hadn't left that apartment last night. Something had let him go. Temporarily. The next 48 hours unraveled in a blur. He called in sick. Didn't leave his apartment. Every time he walked past a mirror, the bathroom, the hallway, even the reflection in his turned-off TV, he flinched. Because sometimes the reflection moved first. He covered them all. Blankets. Towels.
Sheets.
Anything to stop seeing it. But the dreams came anyway. Same hallway. Same whispers. Always ending in that room. He started hearing things too. During the day. The soft click of his apartment door locking itself. A light flickering in the corner. The faint sound of old music. A woman's voice, distant, singing something in a language he didn't recognize. Then came the knock. It was 3:14 a.m. He hadn't been asleep. He didn't sleep anymore. The knock wasn't loud. Just 3 gentle taps. Not from the front door. From the inside of his closet. He stood still, breath frozen. Another knock. 3 more. He approached the closet slowly, heart thudding like a drum in his chest. He reached out.
Stopped.
A thin strip of light was leaking out from the space beneath the door. Golden. Identical to the glow from apartment 5C. He pulled the door open. The closet was empty. Except The back wall wasn't there. It had been replaced by wallpaper.
Peeling. Familiar.
And beyond it, he could see a room. Same layout. Same furniture. But his apartment didn't connect to 5C. Did it? He stumbled back and slammed the door shut, wedging a chair under the handle. He didn't sleep after that. The next morning, he made a decision. He was going back in. Not to confront it.
To end it. He didn't know how.
But he knew if he didn't act soon, the apartment wouldn't just haunt him. It would consume him. So he prepared. Camera. Flashlight. Notebook. Salt. Not because he believed it would help, but because it made him feel like he had control. And a hammer. For the mirror. That afternoon, as the sun began to dip behind the horizon, he stood once again outside the door to apartment 5C. It was open. He hadn't touched it. The same sickly yellow light glowed inside, spilling into the hallway like smoke. He stepped in. The air felt thick. Electric. The walls pulsed with heat, like the building was alive and angry. The door shut behind him. He didn't bother trying to open it. The room looked unchanged. But it felt different. More solid. More aware. He could feel it watching him. The mirror sat silent on the far wall, dusty and cracked, but intact. He approached it carefully, hammer in hand. "Whatever you are," he muttered, "this ends now." He raised the hammer, and the reflection moved. Not him, his reflection. It stepped back, tilted its head, raised a finger, and pressed it to its lips.
Shh.
Then it pointed behind him. David froze. He turned. Nothing. But when he looked back at the mirror, he was no longer in the reflection. Someone else was. A little boy. Sitting on the couch.
Crying.
David's hand dropped to his side. He recognized the child. It was the same boy from the photo. The one hanging on the wall in every iteration of the apartment. But he looked real now. Not a ghost. Not a memory.
Real.
David knelt in front of the mirror. "Who are you?" The boy didn't speak. Just looked up, eyes wide and terrified, pointing toward the ceiling. David followed the gaze. Above him, the light fixture buzzed and flickered. And then, it began to drip. Dark fluid, replaced now by the tall figure, the one from the video. It stood behind the couch, unmoving, watching him. Its face was a blur. No eyes. Just a wide, grinning mouth. David screamed and swung the hammer. It connected. Glass shattered. A deafening shriek filled the room, not from his mouth, but from everywhere. The lights exploded. The walls cracked. And the mirror didn't break. The pieces fell, but inside the frame it was whole, untouched, as if it existed separate from reality. He fell to the floor, coughing. The shriek faded. The room was silent again. But not empty. From the corner, a voice whispered.
Soft.
"Female. Why did you come back?" He turned. There was someone standing near the kitchen. A woman. Late 20s. Long black hair. Pale skin. Wearing an old-fashioned dress. Her eyes were empty. She wasn't a ghost. She wasn't alive. She was the apartment. "You were warned," she said, stepping forward. Her mouth didn't move. David crawled back toward the door. "You invited it," she said, now beside him. Her voice was inside his skull. He reached for the handle. It turned. The door creaked open. Light from the hallway poured in. And for a moment, just one sliver of time, he felt hope. Then the hallway vanished. And behind the door was another mirror. An infinite hallway of reflections. Each one showing him a different version. Some dead. Some screaming. Some smiling. He closed his eyes. When he opened them, he was back in his apartment. Safe. Or so he thought. The closet door creaked open, and golden light spilled out. David no longer trusted his own senses. Since stepping into apartment 5C again, reality had started to behave like a suggestion rather than a rule. The closet was quiet now. The strip of golden light had vanished as suddenly as it had appeared, replaced by an almost oppressive darkness that seemed to absorb any attempt at illumination. He tried opening the door again. It was just a closet now. Or, at least, it looked like one. But when he stared at the back wall long enough, it seemed to breathe. like lungs inhaling beneath plaster and wood. He decided to do something drastic, to break the lease and leave the building entirely. Sell what little he owned and disappear. But when he checked his bank account that morning, it was empty. All of it.
Gone.
Savings. Credit. Even the backup account he never used. He called the bank. The lines were dead. Literally, a flat tone met him every time. He tried calling his parents. Disconnected. He dialed 911. Same result. It was as if the building had cut the cord to the outside world. Trapped him inside a box that only it could control. He left his apartment, determined to find a neighbor, someone who could confirm he wasn't losing his mind. Maybe someone else had experienced something strange. Maybe there was still a way out. He knocked on 5B. No answer. Then 5D.
Silence.
He moved down the hall, trying every door on the 5th floor. Nothing. Then he realized something chilling. Every nameplate on the mailboxes downstairs was labeled with his name. David Marsh. Apartment 5A, David Marsh. 5B, David Marsh. 5C, David Marsh. Every single
one.
He ran down the stairwell to the 4th floor. The same. All the names the same. He tore out of the building, lungs heaving, heart racing. The sun was shining brightly, the world outside normal and indifferent. He walked to the cafe he used to frequent. It was gone. Not just clothes gone. An empty storefront remained, with dust-covered windows and a faded for rent sign swinging lazily in the breeze. He turned to a passerby. "Excuse me." The man kept walking, not even glancing in his direction. David stepped directly in his path. The man walked through him. Not around. Through. David stumbled backward, cold panic washing over him. He ran back to the building. Ran past the lobby. Back to his apartment. 5C's door was open again. And inside, his mirror was waiting. But this time, he could see the boy again.
Sitting. Crying.
David stared at him, heartbreaking. Something about the child tugged at his memory. Like he should know him. Like he had forgotten something important. "Who are you?" he whispered again, stepping closer. The boy looked up. "You left me here." David blinked.
What?
The child stood, slowly walking toward the mirror. "You said you'd come back." David stepped back.
No.
"I don't know you." "You said you'd come back for me," the boy repeated, louder now, almost angry. "But you forgot. You always forget." Then he reached the glass. And touched it. And everything around David changed. The room twisted, warped, like time itself folded in on him. The walls fell away. He was somewhere else. Not in his apartment. Not in 5C. A hospital? The corridor was long, too clean, the lights flickering gently. He walked forward. There were whispers again. But these weren't unintelligible now. They were calling his name. Over and over.
Soft, childlike.
David. David. He turned a corner and saw a hospital room. The door cracked open just enough. Inside, a woman sat beside a hospital bed. A boy lay motionless on the sheets.
Pale. Frail.
Hooked up to machines. The same boy. From the mirror. David stumbled inside. The woman didn't react. He stood before the bed, looking down. The boy's chest rose and fell, faint and shallow. On the nightstand sat a photograph. Him and the boy. David stared. It was him. Older. Gray at the edges. Eyes tired. But him. And the boy was his son. Suddenly, the memories flooded in, but not fully. Just glimpses.
A car accident.
A broken promise. A voice over the phone telling him it was too late. The sound of machines flatlining. The boy's hand slipping out of his. The image of a tiny coffin. He had blocked it all out. Run from it. Erased it. The grief had driven him mad. He never dealt with it. Never mourned. Just ran. And now it had found him. The hospital room began to fade. The air distorted, and the walls melted into shadow. And suddenly he was back in apartment 5C. Alone. The boy was gone. The mirror was cracked. The light gone. Everything was still. David fell to his knees, weeping. He understood now. The apartment wasn't haunted by a ghost. It was haunted by him. His memory. His guilt. His fear. Everything he'd buried deep inside. It had manifested, taken form, and built this place. The sound was deafening. The air sucked inward. The walls groaned. And then silence. The apartment went dark. Pitch black. And then, from behind him, a warm light. Not the sickly yellow glow. A soft, white light.
He turned.
The boy was standing there.
Smiling.
Forgiven. The door behind him opened. And for the first time, it led back to his real hallway. His real apartment.
Clean.
Normal. He stepped through. And the door to 5C closed behind him. David stared at the hallway. It was brighter now, filled with the sharp scent of polish and fresh paint. There were no whispers, no flickering lights, no shadows moving just out of sight. The world seemed real again. But the relief was brief. He walked slowly, cautiously, toward the elevator. Each footstep echoed with a strange finality, as if marking the end of something he hadn't fully processed. When the elevator dinged open, he half expected it to lead back into 5C, back into the mirror, back into memory. But it didn't. It led down.
To the lobby.
Like normal. The security guard at the front desk was reading a newspaper, his face half hidden behind thick reading glasses. He looked up as David passed and acknowledged him. A nod. A small one, but real. David stepped outside into crisp morning air, the weight on his chest lifting just a little. He wandered the city for hours, not thinking, not planning, just existing. Cars moved. People smiled. Life was real again. And yet, something still felt wrong, like something had been left unfinished. It wasn't until that evening, when he returned to his apartment, that he realized what it was. He didn't remember how he got back. One minute, he was sitting on a bench near the park. The next, he was standing in front of apartment 5C again. The hallway was dark now.
Silent.
The door was cracked open. Just slightly. As if inviting him in. He hadn't unlocked it. Hadn't touched it. But there it was waiting. The urge to walk away was strong. Every cell in his body screamed at him to leave. But he knew instinctively that he couldn't. Not yet. He stepped inside. The apartment was empty.
No furniture. No mirror.
Just bare walls, and that same thick silence pressing in from all sides. Only one thing remained. A single object placed in the center of the living room floor. A box.
Old. Dusty.
David knelt and opened it slowly. Inside were things that didn't belong to him, or at least he didn't think they did. A child's drawing of a man and a boy holding hands under a tree. A toy car, paint chipped, wheels bent. A letter, sealed with wax, addressed to Daddy. His breath caught. His hands shook as he unfolded the letter. Dear Daddy, I waited like you said. I didn't cry this time. I know you'll come back soon. I saved your favorite picture of us. I miss you. I love you. Love. Evan. David felt something inside him crumble. Evan. His son. The name hit him like a hammer, unlocking rooms in his mind he had bolted shut long ago. The accident, the grief, the hospital, everything he'd buried. It had all led back to this moment. Tears spilled freely now. Not the haunted kind he'd cried before, but real, full sobs. The kind that cleansed rather than corroded. And then he heard it again. Not a whisper this time. A voice.
Clear. Young.
Close. Daddy. He turned. Evan stood in the hallway, small and pale, eyes wide with hope and sadness. You came back, the boy said, voice trembling. David couldn't speak. He nodded. The boy smiled faintly. You remember now? Yes, David finally whispered. I remember everything. Evan stepped closer. The light around him was warm, not the eerie glow from the closet, but something softer, fuller.
Real.
You don't have to stay anymore, Evan said. What do you mean? You were stuck. Because you forgot. Because you were afraid. But you found me. David knelt, arms open. Evan rushed into them, and for a long moment, they held each other. It was the first time David had felt warmth in what seemed like years. And then, slowly, the boy began to fade. His arms grew lighter, his body more translucent. David held on as long as he could. "I'm not afraid anymore," he said. Evan looked up at him, smiling through tears. "Then you're free." And he was gone. Just like that. The apartment grew quiet again. But it wasn't heavy anymore. It felt peaceful. David stood up. The box was gone. The letter, too. The mirror was still missing. Only the soft buzz of the city outside remained. He left 5C without looking back, walked into his own apartment, and for the first time in weeks, fell into a dreamless, restful sleep. But that wasn't the end. The next morning, he woke to a knock at his door. He opened it cautiously. An elderly woman stood there, holding a set of keys. "Hello. Sorry to bother," she said with a kind smile. "I just moved in down the hall. Apartment 5C. David's blood ran cold. "I thought no one lived there," he said. "Oh, it was just listed last week. I saw the ad online. Beautiful unit. A bit odd, but I liked it." David tried to form words but failed. "Well," the woman continued, "I just wanted to introduce myself. If you ever need sugar or company, feel free to knock." She turned and walked down the hall, into apartment 5C. The door closed behind her. David stood there for a long moment, heart pounding. He stepped forward and pressed his ear to her door. Silence. Then, ever so faintly, a soft static hum, like a radio tuning between stations. Then a child's laugh.
Familiar. Faint.
Far away. He stepped back and walked away. This time, he didn't run. There was a stillness in the hallway that made every creak of the floor under Lila's feet sound like a scream. Her pulse roared in her ears as she turned the key in the lock of apartment 5C one last time. The door opened with a groan, slow and reluctant, as if the apartment itself were warning her away. Inside, the air was dense, humid despite the cold. The furniture looked exactly as she'd seen in her dream, or vision, or hallucination. Worn velvet chairs, dusty lace curtains, and a mirror that reflected something off-center, as though its depth didn't match the room. This time, she didn't just glance around. She stepped inside and shut the door behind her. The lights blinked on, again, without her touching the switch. This time, she wasn't afraid of them. She welcomed the hum of their glow. She knew now that whatever haunted this space wasn't just a presence, it was waiting. Lila stepped back instinctively, but the mirror version did not. It remained where she had stood, still grinning faintly. It mouthed something. Not words. Numbers. 5C. Lila spun around to leave, but the door was gone. Not closed, gone. Where it had been was now solid wall. Panic slammed into her chest like a fist. She pounded the wall, then turned back to the mirror. But the mirror now reflected the hallway. Not her. Not the room. Just the hallway outside the apartment, dim and empty. She could see herself standing in it. But she wasn't. She backed away from the mirror, heart racing. Suddenly, behind her, a rustling. She turned and saw the photograph again, the family photo. The same one she'd seen before. And yet there he was, as though he'd been caught in a frame that predated his own birth. She reached out, and the photograph blinked. Not shimmered. Not glitched. It blinked. As if it were looking at her. A sharp knock, 3 deliberate, thunderous hits on the wall behind her. Lila turned. Nothing. She turned back to the photo. Now the faces were all staring away.
She felt it then.
Something behind her. Not a ghost. Not a person. A presence. "I didn't come for you," she whispered aloud. "I just wanted answers." The air shimmered. The lights flickered. And then the voice came. A deep, guttural whisper, like a breath caught in static. "You opened the door." Lila stumbled backward and hit the mirror. Only it wasn't hard. She fell into it. Darkness swallowed her. No fall. No sense of gravity. Just the cold weight of nothingness, pressing in from all directions. When she woke, she was lying in a bed. White sheets. Cold fluorescent lights. A nurse hovering above her. "Miss Avery?" the nurse said, gently touching her wrist. "You're awake." Lila blinked, struggling to speak. Her throat was sandpaper. Where? St. Elora's Medical. You were found unconscious in the old Pendle building by a city crew. No one's supposed to be in there. They said you were alone, but the nurse's voice lowered, uncertain. You were holding something. She lifted a small object from the bedside table. It was a light bulb, old, brass-tipped, covered in faint soot, but still warm to the touch. Lila stared at it. They said it was still glowing when they found you. After her discharge, Lila returned to the Pendle building with a city official. Apartment 5C's door was gone, sealed with bricks and plaster that looked decades old. No sign of tampering.
No hinges. No nap.
As if it had never been there. The fire escape, where she'd once seen the light, rusted shut. Windows painted black from the inside. The building was condemned shortly after, scheduled for demolition. And yet, on some nights, if she stood across the street just past midnight, Lila swore she still saw it, a faint, pulsing glow from where the window of apartment 5C would have been. And once, just once, she thought she saw her own reflection staring down at her, smiling faintly through the glass.